Part 6. In these hours of waiting, what did they do? This we must tell, for this is history. While the men were making cartridges, and the women lint, while a large frying pan, full of melted pewter and lead destined for the bullet mould, was smoking over a burning furnace, while the vedettes were watching the barricades with arms in their hands, while Enjolras, whom nothing could distract, was watching the vedettes, Combeferre, Courfeyrac, Jean Prouvaire, Foy, Busset, Joly, Barruel, and a few others besides, sought each other and got together, as in the most peaceful of days of their student chats, and in a corner of this wine shop changed into a casemate, within 2 steps of the redoubt which they had thrown up, their carbines primed and loaded resting on the backs of their chairs. These gallant young men, so near their last hour, began to sing love rhymes. The hour, the place, the few stars which began to shine in the sky, the funereal repose of these deserted streets, the imminence of the inexorable event gave a pathetic charm to these rhymes, murmured in a low tone in the twilight by Jean Prouvaire, who, as we have said, was a sweet poet. Meanwhile, they had lighted a lamp at the little barricade, and at the large one of those wax torches which are seen on Mardi Gras in front of the wagons loaded with masks which are going to the Conti. The torch had been placed in a kind of cage, closed in with paving stones on 3 sides to shelter it from the wind, and disposed in such a manner that all the light fell upon the flag. The street and the barricade remained plunged in obscurity, and nothing could be seen but the red flag, fearfully lighted up, as if by an enormous dark lantern. This light gave to the scarlet of the flag an indescribably terrible purple. Part 7. It was now quite night. Nothing came. There were only confused sounds and at intervals volleys of musketry, but rare, ill-sustained and distant. This respite, which was thus prolonged, was a sign that the government was taking its time and massing its forces. These 50 men were awaiting 60,000. Enjolras felt himself possessed by that impatience which seizes strong souls on the threshold of formidable events. He went to find Gavroche, who had set himself to making cartridges in the basement room by the doubtful light of 2 candles. Gavroche at this moment was very much engaged, not exactly with his cartridges. The man from the Rue de Billette had just entered the basement room and had taken a seat at the table which was least lighted. An infantry musket of large model had fallen to his lot, and he held it between his knees. Gavroche, hitherto distracted by 100 amusing things, had not even seen this man. When he came in, Gavroche mechanically followed him with his eyes, admiring his musket. Then suddenly, when the man had sat down, the gamin arose. Had anyone watched this man up to this time, he would have seen him observe everything in the barricade and in the band of insurgents with a singular attention. But since he had come into the room, he had fallen into a kind of meditation, and appeared to see nothing more of what was going on. The gamin approached this thoughtful personage, and began to turn about him on the points of his toes as one walks when near somebody whom he fears to awake. At the same time, over his childish face, at once so saucy and so serious, so flighty and so profound, so cheerful and so touching, there passed all these grimaces of the old which signify, "Oh, bah, impossible! I'm befogged! I'm dreaming! It can't be! No, it isn't! Why, yes! Why, no!" etc. It was in the deepest of this meditation that Enjolras accosted him. "You are small," said Enjolras. "Nobody will see you. Go out of the barricades, glide along by the houses. Look about the streets a little and come and tell me what is going on." Gavroche straightened himself up. "Little folks are good for something, then. That is very lucky. I will go. Meantime, trust the little folks, distrust the big." And Gavroche, raising his head and lowering his voice, added, pointing to the man of the Rue de Billette, "See that big fellow there? Well, he is a spy." "You are sure?" "It isn't a fortnight since he pulled me by the ear off the cornice of the Pont Royal when I was taking the air." Enjolras hastily left the gamin, and murmured a few words very low to a working man from the wine docks who was there. The working man went out of the room, and returned almost immediately, accompanied by 3 others. The 4 men, broad-shouldered porters, placed themselves, without doing anything which could attract his attention, behind the table on which the man of the Rue de Billette was leaning. They were evidently ready to throw themselves upon him. Then Enjolras approached the man and asked him, "Who are you?" At this abrupt question, the man gave a start. He looked straight to the bottom of Enjolras' frank eye, and appeared to catch his thought. He smiled with the smile which, of all things in the world, was the most disdainful, the most energetic, and the most resolute, and he answered with a haughty gravity, "I see how it is. Well, yes. You are a spy? I am an officer of the government. Your name is? Javert. Enjolras made a sign to the four men. In a twinkling, before Javert had time to turn around, he was collared, thrown down, bound, searched. The search finished, they raised Javert, tied his arms behind his back, fastened him in the middle of the basement room to that celebrated post which had formerly given its name to the wine shop. Gavroche, who had witnessed the whole scene and approved the whole by silent nods of his head, approached Javert and said to him, "The mouse has caught the cat." All this was executed so rapidly that it was finished as soon as it was perceived about the wine shop. Javert had not uttered a cry. Seeing Javert tied to the post, Courfeyrac, Busset, Joly, Combeferre, and the man scattered around the two barricades ran in. Javert, backed up against the post and so surrounded with ropes that he could not make a movement, held up his head with the intrepid serenity of the man who has never lied. "It is a spy," said Enjolras, and turning towards Javert, "you will be shot 10 minutes before the barricade is taken." Javert replied in his most imperious tone, "Why not immediately? We are economizing powder." "Then do it with a knife." "Spy," said the handsome Enjolras, "we are judges, not assassins." Then he called Gavroche. "You, go about your business. Do what I told you." "I'm going," cried Gavroche, and stopping just as he was starting. "By the way, you'll give me his musket?" And he added, "I'll leave you the musician, but I want the clarinet." The gamin made a military salute and sprang gaily through the opening in the large barricade. Part 8. The tragic picture which we have commenced would not be complete. The reader would not see in their exact and real relief these grand moments of social perturbation and of revolutionary birth in which there is convulsion mixed with effort, were we to admit, in the outline here sketched, an incident full of epic and savage horror, which occurred almost immediately after Gavroche's departure. Mobs, as we know, are like snowballs, and gather a heap of tumultuous men as they roll. These men do not ask one another whence they come. Among the passers who had joined themselves to the company led by Enjolras, Combeferre, and Courfeyrac, there was a person wearing a porter's waistcoat, worn out at the shoulders, who gesticulated and vociferated, and had the appearance of a sort of savage drunkard. This man, who was named or nicknamed Le Cabuc, and who was moreover entirely unknown to those who attempted to recognize him, very drunk or feigning to be, was seated with a few others at a table which they had brought outside of the wine shop. This Cabuc, while inciting those to drink who were with him, seemed to gaze with an air of reflection upon the large house at the back of the barricade, the 5 stories of which overlooked the whole street and faced toward the Rue Saint-Denis. Suddenly he exclaimed, "Comrades, do you know, it's from that house we must fire. If we are at the windows, devil a one can come into the street." "Yes, but the house is shut up," said one of the drinkers. "Knock." "They won't open." "Stave the door in." The Cabuc runs to the door, which had a very massive knocker and raps. The door does not open. He raps a second time, nobody answers. A third rap, the same silence. "Is there anybody here?" cries Le Cabuc. Nothing stirs. Then he seizes a musket and begins to beat the door with the butt. It was an old alley door, arched, low, narrow, solid, entirely of oak, lined on the inside with sheet iron, with iron braces, a genuine postern of a Bastille. The blows made the houses tremble, but did not shake the door. Nevertheless, it is probable that the inhabitants were alarmed, for finally a little square window on the 3rd story was seen to light up and open, and there appeared at this window a candle, and the pious and frightened face of a grey-haired good man who was the porter. The man who was knocking stopped. "Monsieur," asked the porter, "what do you wish?" "Open," said Le Cabuc. "Monsieur, that cannot be." "Open, I tell you." "Impossible, monsieur." Le Cabuc took his musket and aimed at the porter's head, but as he was below and it was very dark, the porter did not see him. "Yes or no? Will you open?" "No, monsieur." "You say no?" "I say no, my good." The porter did not finish. The musket went off. The ball entered under his chin and passed out at the back of his neck, passing through the jugular. The old man sank down without a sigh. The candle fell and was extinguished, and nothing now could be seen but an immovable head lying on the edge of the window, and a little whitish smoke floating toward the roof. "That's it," said Le Cabuc. letting the butt of his musket drop on the pavement. Hardly had he uttered these words when he felt a hand pounce upon his shoulder with the weight of an eagle's talons, and heard a voice which said to him, "On your knees." The murderer turned and saw before him the cold white face of Enjolras. Enjolras had a pistol in his hand. At the explosion he had come up. He had grasped with his left hand Le Cabuc's collar, blouse, shirt, and suspenders. "On your knees," he repeated. And with a majestic movement, the slender young man of 20 bent the broad-shouldered and robust porter like a reed, and made him kneel in the mud. Le Cabuc tried to resist, but he seemed to have been seized by a superhuman grasp. Pale, his neck bare, his hair flying, Enjolras, with his woman's face, had at that moment an inexpressible something of the ancient Themis. His distended nostrils, his downcast eyes, gave to this implacable Greek profile that expression of wrath and that expression of chastity from which the view of the ancient world belonged to justice. The whole barricade ran up, then all ranged in a circle at a distance, feeling that it was impossible to utter a word in the presence of the act which they were about to witness. L'Acabu, vanquished, no longer attempted to defend himself, but trembled in every limb. Enjolras let him go, and took out his watch. "Collect your thoughts," said he. "Pray or think. You have 1 minute." "Pardon," murmured the murderer. Then he bowed his head and mumbled some inarticulate oaths. Enjolras did not take his eyes off his watch. He let the minute pass. He put his watch back into its fob. This done, he took Le Cabuc, who was writhing against his knees and howling, by the hair, and placed the muzzle of his pistol at his ear. Many of those intrepid men, who had so tranquilly entered upon the most terrible of enterprises, turned away their heads. They heard the explosion. The assassin fell face forward on the pavement, and Enjolras straightened up and cast about him this look, determined and severe. Then he pushed the body away with his foot and said, "Throw that outside." 3 men lifted the body of the wretch, which was quivering with the last mechanical convulsions of the life that had flown, and threw it over the small barricade into the little room on the tour. Enjolras had remained thoughtful. Shadow, mysterious and grand, was slowly spreading over his fearful serenity. He suddenly raised his voice. There was a silence. "Citizens," said Enjolras, "what that man did is horrible, and what I have done is terrible. He killed, that is why I killed him. I was forced to do it, for the insurrection must have its discipline. Assassination is still a greater crime here than elsewhere. We are under the eye of revolution. We are the priests of the Republic. We are the sacramental host of duty, and none must be able to culminate our combat. I therefore judged and condemned that man to death. As for myself, compelled to do what I have done, but abhorring it, I have judged myself also, and you shall soon see to what I have sentenced myself." Those who heard shuddered. "We will share your fate," cried Combeferre. "So be it," added Enjolras. "A word more. In executing that man, I obeyed necessity. But necessity is a monster of the old world. The name of necessity is fatality. Now, the law of progress is that monsters disappear before angels, and that fatality vanish before fraternity. This is not a moment to pronounce the word love. No matter, I pronounce it, and I glorify it. Love, thine is the future. Death, I use thee, but I hate thee. Citizens, there shall be in the future neither darkness nor thunderbolts, neither ferocious ignorance nor blood for blood. As Satan shall be no more, so Michael shall be no more. In the future no man shall slay his fellow. The earth shall be radiant, the human race shall love. It will come, citizens, that day when all shall be concord, harmony, light, joy, and life. It will come, and it is that it may come that we are going to die." Enjolras was silent. His virgin lips closed, and he remained some time standing on the spot where he had spilled blood, in marble immobility. His fixed eye made all about him speak low. Jean Prouvaire and Combeferre silently grasped hands, and leaning one upon the other, in the corner of the barricade, considered with an admiration not unmingled with compassion this severe young man, executioner and priest, luminous like the crystal, and rock also. Let us say right here that later, after the action, when the corpses were carried to the morgue and searched, there was a police officer's card found on Le Cabuc. The author of this book had in his own hands, in 1848, the special report made on that subject to the prefect of police in 1832. Let us add that, if we are to believe a police tradition, Strange but probably well founded, Le Cabu was Claquesous. The fact is that after the death of Le Cabu, nothing more was heard of Claquesous. Claquesous left no trace on his disappearance. He would seem to have been amalgamated with the invisible. His life had been darkness, his end was night. The whole insurgent group was still under the emotion of this tragic trial, so quickly instituted and so quickly terminated, when Courfeyrac saw in the barricade the small young man who in the morning had called at his house for Marius. This boy, who had a bold and reckless air, had come at night to rejoin the insurgents.